Hello, my name is Jacob Stewart. Today I will be talking to you about my mini literature review, designing and debriefing controversial dialogues in the high school classroom. The significance for myself as an instructor who teaches social studies primarily upper level juniors and seniors. This is a topic that's always been near and dear to my heart. I truly enjoy digging into difficult conversations. I think of it as an obligation to my students to help equip them with strategies and techniques to better express their own opinions and to see and learn how to have a conversation with others. I think of it as an obligation to our republic as well. America needs better communication skills. I get frustrated with our digital world and the ways students communicate in that way. So we talk about that too and how to navigate that. But on a ground level, we need to work on growth in communication verbally, one to one, and in smaller group settings. So I think getting these controversial issues embraced and that fundamental skill of deciphering new information and bringing it into our own worldview, that's the thesis of my paper, that those two things, embracing controversy and then figuring out how to debrief after the conversation and make it all fit, that's what we're working with here. This is backed by many articles and studies. The fact that students must be well prepared for these conversations, which begins with the instructor, is critical and is going to be touched on throughout this presentation. And this skill is for students to work on with each other, but also with the instructor. The instructor plays a part in this. And they know that teachers want to help us improve, but they can see when we talk with one another as instructors that adults struggle with this too. So we have a responsibility to make sure we know how we want to have our feelings expressed before we go on into our classroom. There are three main themes. This fundamental understanding of who you are in this conversation is in the green. That's the discussant role. In the middle is embracing controversy is a theme that needs to be accepted by not only the instructor, but also the student. And then lastly is the debriefing. In my research, it is clear that the debriefing process is critical when having these conversations. So all three of these are going to be touched on more in my next session, but we'll first define what the instructor's role should look like as a discussant and go from there. So the research findings related to our society as a whole and the instructor. I've highlighted a few of the key points as we're going through here as I kind of talk through these three quotes from our research. It has been well documented that teachers don't love handling these controversial issues and oftentimes view them as no-win situations. It can be a tricky thing to navigate, whether you're worried about, as the instructor, what's going to happen in your classroom, or worried about how parents will handle things or react, or even what your administration will say. All of those things come into your head as an instructor when handling tough conversations. And I haven't clarified, but when I say difficult or controversial issues, I'm talking about things like abortion, universal health care, the death penalty, topics like suicide, which we'll talk about more in the next section. These are the types of conversations that are often viewed as a no-win, but I will show you are necessary for conversation. We need to be talking about these things. Society also kind of looks at our school system and expects us to have growth and procure conversations about these social issues. To what extent, that can be debated. In some school districts more than others, it's encouraged, and that can be situational for you. And this is going to introduce me to what we're calling the discussant role. And this is going to come up in my research in Tannenbaum. There's an author and researcher named Kay that also talks about the discussant role quite a bit, among others. But the idea with this is that the teacher, as the discussant, needs to engage the conversation and needs to be present, but very importantly, needs to allow every student to express their opinions and establish a rapport among all of the students, ensuring that everyone feels safe in that environment. The idea with the discussant role is to be prepared to discuss this hard topic, but then put it in the hands of the students and make sure they're collaborative in this learning experience. Too often, surrounded by their electronic devices, students are crafting their thoughts or not really thinking at all, putting it out there and not really having to worry too much about how to directly engage that with another and have a conversation. They can kind of hide behind the screen. And so what the discussant role is hoping to do is get students to sit next to each other and talk and collaborate over things that they might not share the exact same feelings about with another student. Mentality in the classroom. The Engebretson and Weiss study talks about what they call the feminist pedagogy, and it's essential for a democratic classroom. And they labeled it the feminist pedagogy because their whole research method is trying to break down this barrier between taboo and controversial issues. In general, feminist pedagogy means we address the injustices and privilege and power type problems in our conversations when we're selecting topics. But there's a clear distinction in the Engebretson, and I talk about this more in depth in my literature review, between a controversial topic and a taboo topic. Controversial topics might be something like universal health care, whereas a taboo topic would be suicide, something that traditionally in our society is kind of just a problem that isn't addressed. Engebretson would say that we need to have a mentality that tells us that all issues, taboo or just the general controversial, need to be talked about, because there are students and people everywhere who struggle with these things and need to talk about them. That's another reason why I'm focusing in on this as a dialogue, and I don't call it a debate necessarily, because the last thing we need is for students to feel like they're coming into this experience to battle their ideologies. We want to make sure students know to be strong in what they believe, but come into this as a conversation and a dialogue, and be prepared to share your opinions, but also hear others and be open to letting new ideas into your lexicon and into your mind. Again, and so this section is to the nuts and bolts of the conversation when you're having these dialogues in the class. So these next two pieces are to make sure that students are aware that there are going to be various perspectives, and to the best of the instructor's ability, find a topic that you know will provide that, because we want to make sure that there is a little discord that gives kids things to think about. We're not looking for complete unison in this, but also picking safe topics. And then lastly, the Brower slide is interesting. His research suggests that there's a 20 student cap is where the threshold kind of moves from giving enough space and enough time for everyone to share their thoughts. If you go past that 20 student threshold, you're kind of getting into, there's just not enough space for this. So that's a key thing to remember going into these conversations. And then finally, the debrief. I selected to share with you today the Jean Lebaudon's Managing Workplace Conflict. This 4-piece strategy is mentioned by Kay in his 2021 study about how to properly diagnose what's going on when you're done with the conversation. So at this point, we've had our dialogue, and now the contention is that we should, as instructors, spend a decent amount of time debriefing and having students really think about what was said. So this 4 parts, workplace conflict, is trying to help address where the lack or the dissonance is for a student. So if student A hears student B talk and they're very different in their understandings of a topic, if person A is hearing things that they might not like, K suggests we look at the Lebanon 4 criteria and figure out what the problem actually is about. Did student A not like student B's information? Is it a facts and data problem? So that the student can know that they should go investigate for themselves and find out if that information is accurate or not. Did student A not like how the process went with, or the method for the debate? So they know that the problem might have actually been with how student B shared, or was student A given a chance to express their feelings about what student B said? 3, was this purposeful for them? Maybe the debate lacked some kind of guidance for them, and so whatever student B said affected student A because of that. Or V, is this just purely a value-laden thing, and student A maybe heard something from student B that conflicted or could actually work for them, and they're struggling with that thing. So the point of this is that in the debrief, we need to help students recognize what the new information means to them, especially if that new information clashes with what they already believe, and encourage them to really ponder that. Not that they need to change their mind instantly or have some big revelation, but understand where someone else is coming from. And that's what the 2001 Hess study is mentioning too, that new material that has conflicting value is the stuff that we need to focus on. And it's important for students to consider that information and where it fits into their own worldview. The implications here, if we add these 3 things together, we are getting at proper civic participation in the betterment of our republic. I truly believe that if we add personal growth for the students next to our responsibility for our republic, with bravery, and bravery is for both the instructor for jumping into these difficult conversations and for the students having the willingness to share, we can create a better environment and conversation space for our republic. We need leaders in this. We need leaders in this time, especially with so much division. Going forward, I have 3 different action research question opportunities for myself. We're looking at one that focuses on the left, in the green, on the student, in the yellowish color, one on the classroom environment, and then the farthest to the right is the instructor's role. So at this point, I'll say that I am leaning towards the middle piece on the environment. My students' action research question reads, what debriefing strategies are most effective at creating in students a desire to hear others and be a more reflective thinker? I think that's a really beautiful question. It could be a little difficult to really get at the root of. On the far right, the instructor's question, I think also is has a lot of depth to it, and I'll read it quickly. What role does the instructor's background play in the formation and implementation of a classroom dialogue over controversial issues? Only problem with this one being that it could take quite a long time to dig into an instructor's background and figure out what it is that's at play when they're implementing a dialogue. But I think this middle one is the topic that makes the most sense at this point. And it reads, what factors are most critical for creating an environment that encourages all students to engage in a dialogue regarding controversial topics? That's what right now I'm wrestling with. I think that finding out the environmental aspects and how to best do that for students and get it set up It would be quite interesting. Thank you for listening, and I hope to hear from you with some questions and some ideas and topics for betterment. So thank you very much.